faith can feel like hearts and butterflies until someone lights a match and burns it all to the ground. Welcome to the Burning Butterflies podcast.
The sad thing is that there's abuse of every kind within the church. But the spiritual abuse is the stuff that just
What's a place there shouldn't be abuse? Like, there just shouldn't be abuse in a place that claims Jesus.
Well, it ruins your soul. If you're new here, we suggest listening to our prologue episode first. This is the story of two women's journey through spiritual abuse and escaping from toxic church culture while finding hope in Christ.
Sometimes it's just the facts, and if you get offended by it, that's a you issue. And if we can't be mature enough to have these conversations, even if some of the topics are difficult, then shame on us.
All right, so today we're going to talk about my origin stories.
Yeah.
What led me to Come As You Are Church, and what kind of made me the perfect target.
Yeah. Okay, so I get to be the interviewer.
Yeah.
So Amanda, tell me, what I'm just kidding. Okay. What would you say is like the encompassing, like, sum it all up and then let's break it down.
Okay.
So you came to Come As You Are in 2000.
I did.
Okay. Up until the year 2000, what was the general theme of your life that you would say, in a nutshell, encompassed it all?
Brokenness.
Okay.
Yeah. I was raised, I'm the oldest.
Okay.
A very rural community. Grew up on a farm, working cows, learned to drive the old pickup, in the pasture. And that's kind of how I was raised. And my dad, openly, loudly to my face he would just basically be like, I don't know what to do with you. You're a girl. If you were a boy, you could come with me. And so that really kind of defined who I was. I was very much a tomboy, very much, trying to prove myself to my dad. And then my dad left. And in kind of a spectacular way. I don't want to go too far off a rabbit trail, but pretty much like my mom got a phone call. I was in 6th grade, and the woman on the phone said, I think I'm engaged to your husband.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Turns out my dad had been having an ongoing affair with a woman, well, multiple women, but this one in particular, from another state. She had no idea my mom existed, his 3 children existed.
Wow.
None of it. And she found out through like a friend of a friend kind of thing. So yeah, that was kind of a huge thing for me.
So you're saying daddy issues are probably like the number one.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because like really honestly, like thinking about in terms of this podcast and what kind of like made me that perfect target, I wanted a father figure who found value in me.
Right.
My dad didn't find value in me enough to tell other women about me. My dad didn't find value in me enough to stay.
Right.
And so that's what I wanted. That's what I craved.
Do you think are there situations before coming to Come As You Are that you were seeking out this validation?
Oh yeah.
In your like growing up?
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, the way I would relate to my peers, the way I would like, I mean, what's the easiest way to get a boy to tell you he finds value and stuff in you? Like, yep, I was that girl.
Yep.
so there was that. I really wanted people to like me. I really tried hard to get people to like me, but I found out very quickly you can't make people like you. But you can make people be afraid of you or hate you.
Yeah.
And I would
You can get
so
what you want one way or another. It's
yeah,
the same like kids getting attention. They're
yeah.
going to get good attention or bad
I'm
attention.
gonna
They
I
need
can't make
attention.
you like me. So then
Then fine. I'm gonna make you respect
you are
me.
gonna no. I don't even want you to respect me.
I was trying
You
to be
don't
nice.
like me. I'll give you a reason to hate me.
Yeah.
Is
Okay.
kind of
Oh, I see.
how I was. So yeah, I mean, I was that person, and
Yeah.
even what led me to come as you are meeting my husband's family attended this church.
Mhm.
Like I wanted a cute boy from Colorado's attention.
Yeah. So had you had previous church experience growing up?
Uh, yes, it was more something we did.
Okay.
So I grew up Lutheran, and there, it really wasn't something that like we embraced. It's not
Okay.
like, oh, we're Lutheran and we
Like
go
every
all
time
the
the doors
time.
are
And
open, we're there. Your church
no,
experience growing up was
no.
like, hey, you go on Easter and Christmas and maybe for somebody's
So
birthday.
in that's the church my dad's family attended, and so that's where we went to church. All of the women and kids went to church in my dad's family. The men did not.
Okay.
My dad, I can count on one hand the number of times I remember my dad being in church, and it was either someone died or like we were singing in a Christmas program. And so my mom would take us, and we would sit with like my aunts and my grandma and my cousins, but it was just something we did. And
So
it was usually, we didn't even go every Sunday.
okay.
It was something that like, now as an adult and knowing that family's dynamics, I feel like it was, my grandma probably said something to my mom, and then we had to go to church on Sunday.
Okay.
Is how I feel.
So, okay, that kind of answers a little bit of the question I was thinking of like, if you could go back into young Amanda's mind without what you know today, what would you say? Like, where did that fit as far as like, because like I feel like you just hit on, there's a tradition and it was most important to grandma, and grandma probably was like, now you aren't doing something right, take your kids to church. Yeah. So then she would go. I'm not trying to put words into this, but that's kind of what I heard.
Oh no, 100%.
Okay. So then what impression did you walk away with as a young adult of the place where church belongs in your life?
Honestly, so I was taught that you could lose your salvation.
Okay.
And that you got it back by taking the Lord's Supper.
Okay.
I know that there's other Lutherans out there that they're like, that's not what Lutherans teach. What I took
Sign
away,
on the door is not always accurate.
Keep in mind, I stopped really honestly attending that church when I was like 14 or 15. And so
okay, so your impression of church up until like 14
was really honestly like my upper elementary, middle school years was really where I started coming into like my understanding of what all this was. And so, I went through the communion, first communion classes. And so with that, we were taught, you are taking Jesus into your body, and you are reestablishing your forgiveness, the covenant that Jesus made when he died on the cross. Like, you're reestablishing that because you're taking Jesus into you. I did confirmation classes, how you are officially I was in 8th grade. I'm officially considered a member of this church. I cheated. And so like we were told like this, like, affirms your salvation. And so like I joke around a lot that like I cheated on my salvation test. Because one of the things we had to do was we had to write every book of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation in order, spell correctly. I suck at spelling.
I'm so glad that you're safe because you could do that.
Yeah, I know, right? So because I don't know that when Jesus ascended into heaven, he said, go and make disciples and make sure they know all the books of the Bible.
I could spell them correctly. I'm not judging. I'm not.
I suck at spelling, so I knew I wasn't going to do that right. So
You're not getting into heaven.
I took a Sharpie and I wrote the Old Testament books on one thigh and the New Testament books on the other thigh, and I wore a skirt and I sat in the back row. I hiked my skirt up and I copied it down.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, cheated on my
salvation
test and made me a member of the church. But I by the time I got into like middle school, my dad had left. I really wanted people to like me. I had started doing things like drinking and sneaking out of the house and things like that. And I knew all of these things were sins. I knew they took my based off of what I was taking away, what I was gleaning of what I was being taught is I was losing my salvation when I did these things. And so I honestly felt like anyone who died outside of a Sunday afternoon statistically probably went to hell.
Right.
Because if anything that you do, you lose your salvation. And the only way to get it back is to come to church and you take communion and you receive Jesus back in and you're
good to go for the week.
Yep, the pastor puts his hand on your head and does his little blessing thing and says the little thing, and that, that now you're saved again. That I was like, so you come to church, you sin on Saturday, you come to church on Sunday, you get your salvation back. What if you sin on Monday and you get hit by a bus on Tuesday? Like, you didn't have a chance to make it back to church to get the little wafer and grape juice. You're screwed.
Right.
And so I just kind of decided like it really didn't matter because I was probably going to go to hell anyway. So
yeah,
I might as well just do what I want.
So you get your young formative years and your idea of church, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your idea of church is I go on Sunday, I get right, and the rest of the week, damned if I do, damned if I don't, and hopefully I make it to Sunday to get right again.
Yep.
But there's something in that dynamic of looking back with this perspective and saying church was if you want to be right, you go to church.
And if you want to have fun, you're a bad kid and you're going to go to hell.
Yeah. And it's not enough to go to church just on Sunday, because what happens Monday through Saturday?
Yep.
So might as well go to church Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because church is the end all be all then.
Mm-hmm.
That is.
Yep.
A fascinating dynamic. Like, knowing you, and like, I've heard this story before, but now looking at it as we're recording this and being like, ooh, we're like honing in on this for perspective. I was like, dang, girl. Okay. So
yeah.
Middle school age, you start running amok, as so many of us do.
Yeah.
But.
And honestly, like, I was such a broken person.
Yeah. Can you articulate that as like a middle school girl, like no shame, no judgment on any of it, like just as a 14-year-old girl, how that, like what that felt like?
So, I mean, being the oldest, I mean, my dad left. My mom had been a stay-at-home mom my entire life. All of a sudden, my mom has to work. So that means I big, like, no shade to my mom whatsoever. She did what she had to do to make it work for us. And I mean, my mom worked.
She did a great job.
My mom worked her ass off to make sure that we did not grow up to be horrible people.
Right.
And anything that she needed to do to make sure that we didn't have the fanciest stuff, but we were able to join the sports clubs and do all this stuff. Like, my mom worked her ass off.
Mm-hmm.
And so that for her to be able to work, I had to then do things at home. And, so my summers, like, I don't ever remember having a summer to do what I wanted to do, because when I was younger and when my parents were together, we did custom harvesting. So we would travel. My entire summer was spent traveling to Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma, and cutting wheat for people. So like farmers would plant their wheat. They didn't have the money or the equipment or anything like that to be able to harvest it. So we would come and they would pay us to harvest it for
Yeah.
them. And so I spent my entire summer living in a camper following the combines
Yeah.
around. And then once my dad left and my parents split, then my entire summers were spent making sure my brother got to t-ball practice and swimming lessons, and my sister, made it to dance class, and all of these things. And so I really didn't have like time to really figure out who I was. Everything about me was all about doing things for the greater good of the family.
Okay, so just to like recapture this, or like just put this into like perspective.
Okay.
So you had this like belief system of I'm not good enough because I'm not a boy.
Yep.
That is completely like cemented into existence by your dad leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets layered on top of with this oldest child responsibility that came your way, and all of this is like abruptly like life changing for a kid. That's difficult.
And I have like the belief system feeding into me also that like you're a sinner and you suck
Yeah, right.
and you're probably going to go to hell.
Right. So you have all of that, this almost perfect storm of just so many things. But like this is where we're at. This is where we're at. This is middle school going into high school. These are formative years, and we've got this layering of belief systems all going into you're ready to like young adult. Like we're now going to take this perfect storm and execute life with it.
Yeah. Well, I do want to point out that like my mom's family was uber supportive.
Right.
They really were. Like I had grandparents who were very involved.
Yeah.
Like I had, aunts and uncles that were very involved. Like we were very close with my cousins. Like I had a family support system that was solid. And like so we had people that would help us.
Yeah.
But like my mom she had to do what she had to do.
Right. Well, and there's no shame in that. Like I'm a single mom, right? And I've been a single mom on and off, well, since my kids were born. But my kids have had to, there's a lot of things that have happened to them in their lives that wouldn't be the way I would have planned it as a mom.
Yeah.
Or if I could go back and change it, sure. There's things, and even with my parents, there's things that it's just a part of my story, and there's no blame or shame to anybody. Like,
well, and I think as a mom myself, like the things that would stress out like my peers, like the women who were young moms, at the same time I was a young mom, like the things that would stress those women out, I'd be like, this is just a normal Tuesday, guys. Like,
right.
So I do think like there were pros to it. You know,
everybody's got good things and bad things in their life. Like I said, no blame, no shame to anybody. We're not saying that.
Yeah.
But there's definitely things that make you stronger in life.
Yeah.
And this is just part of your story.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
But I just like my mom had she did what she had to do and to make it work. And I mean, going into I think it was the summer in between my 8th grade year and my freshman year, I was not old enough to drive legally, and I would take my mom that summer. I would take my mom to work, and I would drop her off in the car, and then I would have the car for the day so that I could take like my brother to swimming lessons and t-ball, and my sister where she needed to go, and do all the things. I would go to the grocery, like my mom would write a blank check to the grocery store, and I would go to the grocery store, and we would do the shopping, and I do all the cleaning and cooking for the day. And there was this one time where I grew up in such a small town, like 1,000 people, small town. So everyone knew everyone. Plus, my granny was the town clerk. So
Uh-huh.
she worked at the town hall. And the one cop in town, like, not even joking, we only had one cop in the
Yes.
whole town. And he didn't work on Sundays. He didn't patrol on Sundays. So you knew you could do
You
whatever
can do
you
whatever
wanted
you want.
on Sundays. And so the one cop in town one day saw me driving with my brother and sister in the car. So he went into the town hall and asked my granny, he's like, "Oh, I didn't know Amanda could drive." And my granny's like, "Yes, Amanda can drive." And then she was very fast in explaining herself to me to point out that she did not lie because he did not ask her if Amanda was old enough to drive.
He just asked if she could drive.
She goes, "Yes, you are
I love
able
you,
to
Granny.
drive. You can
Yeah.
drive."
Right.
You
No, yeah.
know, like,
Well, and I don't know where we get this idea that honestly, like we're gonna sit here and be like, no blame, no shame. But where do we get this idea that that's not okay? Because I'm sitting here thinking, as you're telling your story, like as a single mom, my kids have all learned, like, hey, we're a family and we have to do this together.
yeah, we're a
And it's
team.
not one person's
Yep, we're a
responsibility.
team.
And yeah, you know what? Sorry, older kids. You know, if it's your picture perfect idea that your childhood was going to be, I don't know what fairy tale are we trying to apologize about. I'm not sorry that my kids have learned to work together as a family. If somebody needs something, we all get together and we go help that one because we're a whole,
Yeah.
you know. But so now that I think about that, like, yeah, definitely.
Well, and even as adults, like,
Yeah.
my siblings and I have a very good
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. And that's how it should be in a family. And I think the point though that I was coming out of that more focusing in on was the like greater whole. Like I became, that's the belief. So it's like you went from like I'm not good enough, and then you had this, I have to sacrifice myself for the greater, for the whole
Yeah.
of the group, as opposed to like being able to take care of my individual needs. So none of what you said is bad or wrong. You know, we do need to as a family come
Well,
together, but it's when that belief goes into a toxic level.
Well, and when something like that is then used to manipulate you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I'm doing is looking at it from like the bigger picture side of being
Yes.
like, oh, okay, I can see where
Mm-hmm.
the circumstances aren't wrong. You know, the circumstances aren't bad. It's that now we just have these two belief systems that
Yep.
were used later on to manipulate, along with the church of like the door being open 7 days a week. Like those three things, like we just like ding 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 ding. Like if you were gonna have a perfect storm of what made you to be able to be manipulated, that's it right there.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
the perfect
100%.
trifecta right there.
100%.
Okay, but let's jump into now. We've got this Amanda middle school going into high school. How did you meet your husband?
So I met my husband the summer after my freshman year of high school.
Okay.
My hometown had rodeos that they did every Friday night. And a friend of mine was dating a friend of his. So that's, you know.
Oh, yeah. I'll bring my friend. You bring yours.
Yeah, kind of thing. And so
if not, they can talk while we hang out.
Yeah. Her boyfriend started bringing his friend from, Colorado to come up and ride bulls. And that's, it started off as, I thought it was going to be a summer fling. And
20 some odd years
yeah,
later.
we've been together for like 23 and a half years.
Wow.
We will have been married 20 years this coming spring. So
some people go to rodeos and come home with a buckle.
Yeah, so I've had a summer fling that just
never
has
ended.
just keep flinging. And so so I met him, and
met him at the rodeo. He's from Colorado.
He's from Colorado, so
Okay.
he is he kind of bounced around a little bit when he was like little, but mostly since like middle school on, he's been in this community,
same local community,
local community that we're in now.
Okay.
And so I started dating him. I was invited to come to his, come visit his family, meet his family, things like that. So I came to stay a weekend. I would come, I'd stay in his sister's bedroom, and, we'd have campouts, me and his sister. And then we would go to church, and his family I think Come As You Are started in 97, 98, somewhere
Okay.
around there. And his family started going like 99, 2000.
Okay.
And so they were, kind of right in that beginning process of it. And this was kind of the hip church. His family wasn't churched
Okay.
like growing up. Like they didn't, attend
So going to church was
any
new
sort
for
of
them.
any sort of
Okay.
denominational church. It was kind of something my husband started going to the youth group. He got invited by a friend,
Yeah.
and then his grandfather had passed away,
Okay.
and so they started attending
Okay.
as a family at this church, and they really liked it. I mean, it was at this point, it was the only non-denominational church in town.
Okay.
They were the only church that had drums and an electric
Right.
guitar.
Yeah,
And
this is like the verge of like this is the time frame of like non-denominational.
oh yeah, this is like so.
the
There's
rise of the non-denominational church
there's
and
a
electric
comedian.
guitars and drums,
There's a comedian on
which was
TikTok.
happening everywhere,
Yeah.
by the way, not just in Colorado.
There's a comedian on TikTok that says like, I was a Christian in the 90s. You don't get more Christian
You
than
don't get
Christian
more
in the
Christian.
90s. And I mean, like, that was kind of it. Like, Left Behind series had just come out.
Yeah.
You're starting to have like the really mainstream rise
Yeah, this is a
of
shift. A church shift. We are living in a church shift. Yeah.
like you're seeing more and more contemporary Christian radio stations come up. So I mean, this is huge. They like my father-in-law loved the fact that the church played Spirit in the Sky.
Oh yeah.
On a Sunday morning.
Oh yeah.
Like that's amazing to them.
Yeah,
and so the demographic was definitely like, you had these people in their 30s and 40s that were kind of raised by like the hippie movement a little bit, and they rode motorcycles and love America.
And a lot of like this is like the hippies, like the hippie generation, like becoming adults.
Yeah.
We were kids in the 70s and now we're gonna do adult life in the 90s. So
yeah. And so they all these people were starting out their families, or had young kids, teenage kids, and that's kind of the core of how that church started. And so I would go, and the very first Sunday, I well, the first Sunday I remember, like I think we probably went a couple of times and we sat like in like the church service with his parents, but the first time I really remember going and having it be like a big deal that I was going to church was the first Sunday that we went to the back to the youth session. So like everyone would do worship together, and then the teenagers would go to like a youth only thing. And this was like just the beginning of doing this on Sundays. And so it was only, I want to say it was like once a month or something that they would do this. Otherwise, the teenagers would sit in service all the time. And so this was like the very formative years of like youth has their own Sunday lesson, And so the Tom and Charlotte's daughter and her husband were the youth leaders at that time. So we go back there, and it's like we're kind of, because we're meeting at the high school, so we're in the cafeteria, and there's like a big circle of chairs in the cafeteria, and they start off and they go around and they're asking prayer requests and how did you connect with God this week. No one had ever asked me those questions, like ever. And so I was kind of in a panic because like we were kind of towards the end of the circle as they were going around, and like I was like, oh, I'm just going to say pass. Well, like that was not an option. Like everyone was sharing something. And I was like, I don't want to be the only weirdo who says pass, but like, I don't know what to say.
Right.
And so like, as it got closer, I was kind of like in a panic because like, I don't know these people. And I, like, as you can imagine, I have like a wall that's probably about 40 feet thick built around me. I'm like, and I am like, I'm not opening up. I like these people. I don't know them. Like this is,
This is a very interesting experience, to say the least, for somebody who's not had any really church experience.
Yeah. And so,
and coming into this with your perspective. Yeah, I can see that totally.
So we get to the point where it's me and I like kind of panic and I make something up.
Right.
And I think I said something about like I have a test coming up I'm nervous for or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I kind of panic.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm just like, oh yeah. And so we kind of move on. And um I don't think my mother-in-law like intended it to like, and I know she didn't. She didn't intend it to be like a weird thing, but like she was excited that I was there and everything. So she would introduce me to everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and like everyone was so excited and happy, and like I was getting hugs by people that I don't know, and so
Yeah.
I was kind of in this like I don't know you. So my brother calls it like you go into hot dog mode where you just like don't touch me, like
Please don't. Yeah, stick as a board. Like, please leave me alone.
So, but I mean, I was getting hugs
Yeah.
and like everyone was just so friendly and so happy. And even like the teenagers were like, you know, so happy. And church ends and everyone hugs like they hug when you show up and you hug them goodbye. And it's just like, you know, it's just like a really like completely different experience than I had ever had before, because you know, like going to the church I grew up in, the Lutheran church, like no one wanted to be there on a Sunday. You know, you had like the old couple who they always sat in the front row, but then like halfway through service he's snoring and slumped over and she's elbowing him in the side to wake up.
So this is a night and day difference.
Yeah, and I think he was even a deacon in the church or something like that. He'd fall asleep.
Yeah.
Like, you know, so it was just a completely different experience for me. And that Sunday, we all go out to the truck. We're all piled in there. You know, my father-in-law drove like an extended cab, like red pickup. And so we're all like, all of us kids are like crunched in the back seat, right? Like my husband and me. I mean, he's my boyfriend at the time, but you know, like Justin and me, and then his brother and sister, we're all like crammed in the back. And his mom gets in the front. She turns out, she's like, "So, what did you think?" And I'm like, it kind of seems like everyone you go to church with is high. Like, and she like looked at me and I was like,
what?
Everyone is so like, why are y'all so happy to be at church on a Sunday morning? Like, this is like really just
mind-boggling.
Like, yeah. But I was also very intrigued because it seemed like they had something that I had never been a part of before, but they were also like welcoming me into that.
Right.
And so I don't know. I was very intrigued.
Gosh, if you had to sum it up, you've walked in the doors, you've had your experience, you know who you were before the doors, you know who you've been after you walked through the doors, and 20 years later, at this point, how would you sum up like, this is my origin story, what made me the perfect target walking into these doors?
I think I felt like I was lacking something. I had like this like just kind of like unrest and like brokenness about me, and so to go into a situation where just in the short experiences that I had there, that they seemed to have figured all that out.
Yeah.
And so I was very curious about that. Like it seemed like they had something that I wanted and I couldn't quite put my finger on what that was. Now I know that it was like I wanted acceptance. I wanted to feel like I belonged somewhere, and I wanted to feel like I was wanted to belong there.
Would you say that the system is set up to prey upon people just like you?
100%. I mean, like, because I mean, we're gonna
no, I just
like we're gonna get there, but I mean, like, I later on down the road, I was that person who would know who the new people were walking in the door.
Yeah.
For that reason.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's me. So,
mic drop.
tune in next week because it's about to get wild. We're gonna do Melissa's origin story.
You're gonna need like 6 cups of coffee to hang out with me. Burning Butterflies is a listener-supported podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing supporters on Patreon.
Follow the link in our show notes to learn how you can become a Patreon supporter too. Supporters get exclusive access to bonus content each month, including outtakes, cut content, and supporter-only episodes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on your listening platform.
Burning Butterflies is a production of Asha Media. Thank you for listening.